Before I get to the agenda, I'd like to address this week's Arctic Frost hearing. First, this committee is not going to give in to the Democrats' ill-advised strategy to bring Jack Smith in before our
Tonight, on the record, Special Counsel Jack Smith was appointed to oversee this investigation. Attorney General Pam Bondi now leads the Department of Justice. FBI Director Kash Patel now leads the Bureau. Senator Chuck Grassley chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Ron Johnson chairs the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Representative Jamie Raskin serves as ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. These are the individuals with the authority to see the unredacted truth, and tonight what they have seen and what they have chosen to say and not say is what this report is about. Play this clip.
Investigative record is entirely ready. Kim Strassel of the Wall Street Journal had this to say about my recent document production. The facts to roll out about Jack Smith, quote, "those facts are getting uglier," end of quote. Second, my Democrat colleagues in the partisan media continue to sing a sob story about fired partisan DOJ and FBI personnel. So I want to take this opportunity to remind my colleagues that many of the fired personnel retaliated against my whistleblowers.
You have heard the claim. You have heard it from officials in positions of institutional power. You have heard that the investigations into the former president were a partisan witch hunt, that they were a political conspiracy dressed as law enforcement, that the evidence was manufactured, that the entire apparatus of federal investigation was weaponized for electoral destruction. Senator Grassley called it a political conspiracy. He called it a partisan spear launched to poison a campaign. He said it was worse than Watergate. Attorney General Bondi called it an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. Former President Trump called it lawfare. These are not fringe allegations. They are official positions held by the people currently running the institutions that control the evidence. That is the claim. Now examine what the documents actually say. Play this clip.
During the Biden administration, and then I didn't hear a single peep from my Democrat colleagues then about these whistleblowers' lives being upended and destroyed. And I believe part of the 16 people that I helped get justice in the last year were some of these personnel. Not all of those people wanted their jobs back, but they wanted their national security clearance. They wanted back pay, and some of them wanted their jobs back and got their jobs back. But when their lives were...
On January 13, 2023, federal prosecutors produced a memorandum. This is not a leak. This is not an anonymous source. This is a formal prosecutorial document generated by the Department of Justice based on the FBI's investigative determination. The memorandum states that classified documents were commingled with documents created after the former president left office, not misplaced, not accidentally mixed. The finding is commingling, a deliberate, sustained act of keeping the nation's highest secrets alongside personal business records in a private residence. The prosecutors were precise about what this meant. The documents they wrote would be pertinent to certain business interests, and they added that this pertinence established a motive for retaining them. The evidence suggests this was not a mistake of moving boxes. The evidence establishes this was a decision made for a reason, but the documents do not stop there. The memorandum specifies that these were not routine briefings. They were not press summaries or policy talking points. They were, in the language of the prosecutors, highly sensitive documents, the kind that only presidents and officials with the most sensitive authority ever hold. One specific document recovered from the former president's private residence was so classified that only 6 people in the entire United States government had authorized access to it. 6. In a country of 330 million people, only 6 individuals were cleared to see what was sitting in a box at a private club in Florida. That single fact is not a political argument. It is a number, it is a standard, and it establishes the scale of what was at risk. Play this clip.
Being upended, I never heard anything from the other side. Third and lastly, This committee today is investigating government weaponization because my Democrat colleagues didn't lift a finger during the Biden administration. These were 4 years of uninterrupted, consistent, and sustained political attacks on Republicans by the previous administration. This committee's work exposing that political corruption will continue.
The conduct then extends beyond the residence. In June 2022, the former president transported classified documents on a private flight to his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Federal prosecutors identified a classified map among the documents present on that flight. They determined, based on investigative findings, that this map was shown to individuals aboard the aircraft. One of those individuals was Susan Wiles, who at the time served as chief executive of the former president's Super PAC. She was not a government official. She was not a cleared intelligence professional. She was a political operative seated on a private jet, and a classified map, a document bearing national security markings, was displayed in her presence. This is not allegation. This is an investigative finding produced by the Department of Justice. Now examine the motive that the January 2023 memorandum identifies. During the same period in which these documents were being retained, the former president was actively entering financial partnerships with entities linked to the government of Saudi Arabia. He signed agreements with LEV Gulf, which operates under the financial umbrella of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. His organization was in discussions with Saudi real estate investors, and weeks after the June 2022 flight, where a classified map was shown to unauthorized passengers at Bedminster, the former president played golf with the head of the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. The prosecutors did not speculate about the connection. They stated it. The business interests linked to retained documents confirm a motive for retention. That motive is money. The evidence confirms motive. This is where the claim collapses. The strongest structural defense available to those who argue political weaponization is the argument of tainted origin. Senator Grassley raised it directly. He pointed to FBI supervisory agent Timothy Thibault. He alleged that Thibault was an anti-Trump partisan who violated the no self-approval rule, an internal FBI policy prohibiting supervisors from unilaterally authorizing their own investigations. Grassley cited emails in which Thibault wrote that the documents case, frankly, took too long for us to open. The argument is the fruit of the poison tree. If the investigator is biased, the theory goes, the investigation is invalid and the evidence is inadmissible. Now examine why this argument does not hold. Biased agents do not cause presidents to commingle classified files with business records. Biased agents do not transport a classified map onto a private jet or display it to political operatives. The evidence uncovered, the commingled documents, the January 2023 memorandum, the identified classified map, the prosecutorial finding of business-linked motive, all of it exists independently of Timothy Thibault's personal opinions. The law does not grant immunity to a crime because the person who discovered it held a political view. The existence of a document that only 6 people in the United States government are cleared to see, sitting in a private residence, is a fact that survives any allegation of investigative bias. The defense argues about the investigator. The evidence argues about the documents. These are not the same argument. One of them is traceable to paper. The other is traceable to a senator's press statement. There is a distinction that matters legally and is rarely explained clearly. Rule 6E of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure governs the secrecy of grand jury proceedings. It is a crime for prosecutors to disclose grand jury material to third parties without court authorization, and yet the current Department of Justice produced documents to Congress that were explicitly marked as containing Rule 6E and sealed material. This production was not made to advance criminal accountability. It was made to build a public narrative discrediting the previous investigators, using the very sealed materials the law was designed to protect. The DOJ invoked secrecy law to conduct a disclosure that secrecy law prohibits. That is not oversight, that is selective exposure. The no self-approval rule is the second legal distinction that demands clarity. It is an internal FBI administrative policy. It is not a statute. Violating it does not make evidence disappear. A courtroom does not throw out the recovered phones, the commingled documents, and the classified map because a supervisor filled out an approval form incorrectly. Internal policy violations are reviewed through disciplinary and administrative channels. They do not erase physical evidence of criminal conduct. When this distinction is deliberately collapsed, when an administrative policy violation is presented to the public as equivalent to prosecutorial misconduct that voids all evidence. The intent is obfuscation, not legal education. The law is not being explained. The law is being weaponized to confuse it. The professional judgment on fitness and risk is not a political assessment. It follows from the established facts. A person who retains the nation's most sensitive classified documents in a private residence, commingled with business records, has demonstrated an inability to distinguish between national security and personal financial interest. A person who transports a classified document on a private aircraft and displays it to an unauthorized civilian has failed the most elementary standard of custodial responsibility. The January 2023 memorandum describes the potential harm as aggravated. The word aggravated is not rhetorical. It is a prosecutorial classification. It means the risk is elevated beyond ordinary negligence. It means the sensitivity of what was exposed and the context in which it was exposed place this case at the upper range of national security violations. The verdict on conduct is not close. What is close, what remains actively contested and unresolved, is the institutional response. The Department of Justice is currently engaged in selective disclosure. Documents are being produced to Congress that serve a particular political narrative. Other documents, including the full scope of the investigative findings, are being withheld. The FBI used what investigators have described as prohibited access file designations to conceal certain documents from its own internal agents, a practice that, if confirmed, represents a systemic corruption of the chain of evidentiary access. Federal Judge Aileen Cannon issued protective orders that prevent the full investigative record from reaching the public record. Taken together, these institutional mechanisms are not incidental. They are the architecture of managed concealment. The question is no longer whether the documents existed. The question is who is currently deciding what happens to the evidence of what was done with them. The procedural demands are specific and time-bound. Congressional investigators have requested the unredacted seating chart for the June 2022 Bedminster flight. They have requested documentation identifying which specific business interests were linked to which specific classified documents. They have asked for a complete accounting of which family members and associates were made aware of the retained materials. The production deadline for the full investigative files stands at April 14, 2026, 3 days from tonight. What is produced and what is withheld, redacted, or destroyed in the interval between this moment and that deadline will define the extent to which institutional accountability in this case is real or ceremonial. Whistleblowers have already produced the first documented tranches. The next tranche is either on its way or it is not. There is no middle position. The stakes are not abstract. The country is currently conducting military operations in the Middle East. American service members are deployed in active theaters. Intelligence assets are operating in real time. The sensitivity classifications attached to the documents identified in the January 2023 memorandum exist because the information inside them, if disclosed to adversarial governments, has the potential to cost lives. When a classified map is shown to an unauthorized person on a private aircraft, even without confirmed transmission to a foreign power, the chain of custody is broken. Once broken, it cannot be audited. Once the chain of custody is unauditable, the damage is assumed. This is why the classification system exists. This is why the prosecutors use the word aggravated. This is why the people who ran these institutions are now working to make the investigative record disappear. The claim was a witch hunt. The evidence is a memorandum dated January 13, 2023. The claim was a political conspiracy. The evidence is a classified map on a private flight to Bedminster. The claim was unconstitutional lawfare. The evidence is a prosecutorial finding of business-linked motive for retaining documents that only 6 human beings in this country were authorized to see. These are not competing interpretations of ambiguous data. These are competing claims about what the documents say. And the documents say what they say, regardless of who is currently running the Department of Justice, regardless of who now sits in the director's chair at the FBI, and regardless of how many senators use the word weaponization in their press releases. The evidence found them. The memorandum recorded what was found. The law defines what it means. The only question that remains is whether the institutions charged with enforcing that law will be permitted to do so, or whether the last official act of this case will be the careful, deliberate burial of its own record.